Next question, again, getting some really nice questions from the audience today. Housing development has not been going on in the city recently, the past few years, but there are some indications that that could change in the next few years during this next council term. And what should the city's priority be when residential development resumes in Tracy? Mr. Morelos, I believe you're first up for this one.
I think one of the biggest things in regards to residential development has been infill. We have a lot of infill where houses can be built, and that was the thing that was discussed, I forget how many years ago. And so we need to do that. In regards to even residential development, and not necessarily just all houses, but something needs to be done about the bow tie. It's called the bow tie, but there's a lot of history there in regards to the bow tie. It's contaminated. When are we going to solve that problem? I know it's hard to budge the Union Pacific, because I remember that, and I recall that the city was in negotiations with the Union Pacific to buy that property, but because they would not take the lead in taking care of the contamination, the city backed out, which rightfully so. But what needs to be done is to, and it should have been done maybe 20 years ago, is fight Union Pacific, take them to court. And maybe by now we would have had that cleaned up one way or another by Union Pacific. It's their responsibility. So those are the kind of things that we need to do in regards to development. Yes, and there needs to be continuing growth in the city of Tracy, because that's what brings new businesses into Tracy. That invites them, because there is housing here in Tracy. They want to put their employees in those houses. So yes, there is room for some growth in Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you.
So priorities for housing, residential, residential growth here, as the market has dictated so far, where we are right now. But in the future, we will begin to do housing, build housing, develop around town again. And one of the things I think that should be priority that we should look at is just the makeup. Look at the makeup of what Tracy is now and what we're looking for in the future, and just hearing some of the studies and the reviews as far as for bringing in new companies and bringing in the hospital and all the type of jobs that we're looking to bring here. We're going to have more dense housing. We're going to have more apartments. I prefer to live in a single house, but there are others that prefer to live in apartments. So we need to have nice housing. We need to also provide executive housing. When I was looking to bring some guests to town, I was looking for hotels and higher class hotels for companies that they're looking for. So there's just some things that we need to look at doing if we want to take our city to that next level. And so I believe that the housing, just in the short of it, that we should look at some more dense housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Birdsall.
Yes, I agree with what Nancy and Ray were talking about. The fact is, yes, we need more housing, and it has to be market driven. We do not want to flood the market with a lot of houses and there's no sales. It doesn't really make sense. But going back to economic development, which is really a driver of a community, is when you start to look at it, and if you're going to bring companies over here, you got to have diversified housing. If you want to bring an executive out of the Bay Area, you have to have some top-level housing. Some of the housing is not available at this moment in Tracy, but you do have to have housing. If we would have gotten Amazon back when it was being discussed, and you create 2,000 jobs, you got to have a place for these people to live. They're not all here today. So you have to look at it. It has to be market-driven. It has to make sense. And I think the big part of it is just don't overbuild. And I think when it comes down to who should build first, etc., who's ready first? Who's really ready to go? Money is in line. The market is there. Should all of it be given to one person? No. You have to have a balance between infill and between subdivisions. And I when you have a lot of people maybe looking at a subdivision, sometimes just sitting around the table talking with the city, you might be able to figure out how it can be divided in a fair way, where everybody has an opportunity to build, have the diversity in housing, and the city is going to grow. And if you want economic development, you have to have a place for people to live. Thank you.
Was the question specifically prioritizing growth or prioritizing residential growth?
The question focused more on residential growth.
Okay, I'm going to answer it the other way though, because
It's your microphone.
you know, the general growth, you know, there was a time that residential development was the king in Tracy. It will once again be a very key element to growth in Tracy, but the key element in the shorter term will be economic development, bringing in new businesses, expanding jobs, and that, as Roger alluded to, when people want to bring their business or expand their business, they're looking for, are there places for my people to live? Are there places for my employees to afford a home? Is this a quality town for my employees? Conversely, when you have retail enterprises, they look at the rooftops. You know, the classic example, everybody said, gee, how can we get a Trader Joe's? They have a business profile, they're looking for X number of rooftops. And when you get those rooftops, be it Trader Joe's or whomever, they will consider. So it's all intermeshed. The focus needs to be on general economic development, bringing investment, bringing jobs. People with money will be able to buy houses. And that will drive our market. It has to be market driven. And I do think it's the city's job to work with all concerned parties, be it infill, be it new development, I think there's room for everybody to do what they need to do. That there has to be a high level of cooperation, but I think this is something that can be done. And you know, that's what I'm committed to seeing done. That everybody get a shot to get their projects forward, and that we continue to be a quality community for people to live, and we have quality housing projects coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.